Welcome to Beyond the Headlines, where we break down today's local news stories with our very own reporters. Today we will be discussing a Survive Alive house dedication from the Normal Fire Department, then a look at the future of public transit in central Illinois, and an update onto burn bans across the state. Our first big local story of the day, the Normal Fire Department is honoring two of their chiefs who passed away last year. WMED's Austin Feeman joins us now from our Bloomington Bureau with more on what exactly they are doing to remember their fallen chiefs. Austin, thanks for coming on.
Well, Cameron.
And I'll have to ask you, what exactly have they done to honor the chiefs?
Of course. Yeah, Cameron, so basically they have dedicated their Survive Alive house in their names. Now this Survive Alive house is basically, it's kind of a tiny home to simulate a fire situation. The two chiefs, Chief Smalley and Chief Cermak, they passed away last year, near a little less than a month after each other. So they dedicated this Survive Alive house. They put two signs up on it to kind of honor them. You know, their families, they donated a significant amount of money to support this cause and to get those signs on them to keep their memory alive.
All right, so then what is the Survive Alive house then?
Yeah, so the Survive Alive house, it's a home fire simulator for kindergarten through second graders. It's a tiny home. It has a kitchen. It has an upstairs even, which is pretty cool. It has real smoke alarms. It has a fog machine to simulate the smoke when a fire would happen. And even when I was a child in elementary school, I remember doing this Survive Alive house, and it's been a core memory for me. And for some reason, I don't know why, but it's stuck in my head. But basically, it teaches the children the 6 steps that they need to take if they are involved in a house fire, you know. And they also go over like a meeting place. Who do you go to? Who do you call? What do you do if you get caught in a fire? You know, stop, drop, and roll, and all that. But they basically help these kids through this fire experience, I should say. And you know, for some kids, it's kind of scary being in a house fire. So this kind of takes some of that scariness off of them for if or when the real thing actually occurs.
So how is it helping honor and remember the chiefs then?
Yeah, so, you know, both the chiefs spent a lot of time educating the community about fire safety, specifically children. You know, they basically, this is keeping their memory and their dedication to their community alive. This Survive Alive house has helped so many children over the past many years, at least 15 years since when I did it. You know, this year during the Fire Prevention Month, in the month of October, there will be touring 16 different schools in Normal and reach over 1,000 students total, you know, teaching them about fire safety. And obviously this is working. You know, one of the firemen told me that there has been no child deaths in a fire since 1994. So that is over 20 years, almost 30 years, I want to say. I can't do the quick math in my head, but you know, it's keeping people safe. And you know, with the Survive Alive house, this is what the chiefs put all of their heart into. So keeping it alive, bringing it around, and teaching more kids is really helping keep that memory alive.
That's great, Austin. Thank you for breaking that down and really telling us this story. Now, I actually have meteorologist Molly Naisland in the studio because we were talking in between shows because it's not often that an animal escapes from a zoo and then returns on its own, but that's kind of what happened in Kent, England. Suki, an Asian bear cat, also known as a binturong, got out of her enclosure last Thursday. Workers and volunteers using heat-detecting drones spent days looking for the bear cat with no luck. Then yesterday morning, Suki came back to the zoo. She's now being evaluated by zoo staff. Binturongs are considered a vulnerable species by the International Union for Conservation. Kind of silly little guy in a silly little excursion.
I love the picture. Just hanging out, quite literally, just hanging out, basket in the sun. I wonder, it's hard to tell how big they are, but they do seem like a decently sized animal.
They also look very friend-shaped.
Yes.
Which now, even though it looks friend-shaped, I don't know if it is a friend.
Yeah, that happens a lot in the animal kingdom. I know we've discussed that with bears before.
Bears,
they
of
look
course.
so cute and pettable, but they are absolutely not. Do not pet a bear.
Like, have you seen like when the beady eyes of a polar bear and it
I
just looks at you? It's just so
know.
sweet. And it's
They're-
like,
yeah.
and then Patrick over the weekends, he'll get upset that we like bears and think
Oh, that Patrick.
yeah, Patrick, he's just stuck up sometimes. He doesn't
Yeah.
want me patting polar bears.
Well, you know, he's more of a fan of the Cowboys than the Bears.
That is true. That is true. All right, when we come back on Beyond the Headlines, we've got myself talking about public transit's future in Central Illinois. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. Now we'll be flipping the script a little bit, putting our very own anchor Cameron Main into the hot seat. Our next big local story of the day, a town hall was held to discuss how a Chicago transit bill in Springfield could impact Peoria. Now Cameron went to a meeting and he's going to break it down for us real quick. Now Cameron, tell me about what was this town hall all about? Tell us what went down.
So basically, there's this Chicago Transit funding bill that Chicago Transit is facing a fiscal cliff of around $770 million that needs funding by the end of this year. So this was mainly a Chicago problem throughout the whole legislature when, state lawmakers were discussing it in Springfield throughout this year. And then downstate kind of got added to the proposal because they couldn't really find any funding mechanisms that would stay just in the Chicago area. So they tried to pass this bill that was basically the way to fund Chicago Transit would be a statewide delivery tax on all non-medical and non-grocery deliveries. That kind of died in the House, mainly because that is a pretty controversial thing for downstate lawmakers to vote on. So it just didn't have the votes in the House. So basically, now that the spring session is over and now we're going into the fall veto session, lawmakers are starting to consider, hey, maybe we don't do a Chicago transit bill, maybe we do an Illinois transit bill, and we do a statewide tax that benefits transit across all of Illinois. So that was what this town hall was about and how Peoria could benefit from that bill.
Yeah, so what could Peoria get in this bill? Tell us exactly what's going on.
So there were a couple of proposals that were mentioned. There was the general manager of CityLink, Kofi, was there, and he talked about how the additional funding they would get, or maybe I should talk about some of the funding things they should get, maybe some of the nitty gritty, because downstate transit agencies would get $220 million more in funding, and then those, basically any state project, locals would only have to match funding by 20% instead of the current 35%. So it means that there's just a lot more money around to go for transit projects and to support public transportation. Mayor Rida Ali was very excited at the idea that they could finally get their direct line from Peoria to Chicago. Peoria is one of the few cities in the state of Illinois that doesn't have a train line going into Chicago. And so obviously there's a benefit from people in Peoria being able to do day trips up into Chicago and go check around and tourism. But it also matters for Peoria because it means people from Chicago can come to Peoria. That means that people that maybe live in the Chicago area or have families in the suburbs and they graduated from college, they can get a job in Peoria and they could take the train up on weekends to see their family in Chicago. It can be a really beneficial proposal. Obviously, this train idea has been discussed for a while, and it's still up in the air of whether this bill would actually really consolidate that train being made, because there's still a lot of things to do before you build a train line. But that was one of the ideas that was at least talked about in the town hall that Peoria could benefit from.
Yeah, so tell us, the big question, will this proposal pass?
Well, basically, State Senator Dave Kaler, Peoria State Senator, said this bill has to pass. There has to be funding for the Chicago transit system because otherwise thousands could lose their jobs, lines could be cut. It would very negatively impact Chicago, which Chicago is a very important economic hub in Illinois, and it funds a lot of the money that comes from Chicago and the Chicago area and the suburbs and the Collet counties. That money really matters for Illinois, especially downstate. A lot of downstate programs get funded from tax dollars from, well, across the state, but most of that money is coming from that area because of how much money that area makes. So it could be an economic issue if this proposal doesn't pass. And there's just some issues along the way that maybe this bill couldn't pass, maybe it won't, maybe it might even be delayed to lame duck, which is at the start of January 2026. But that could be a worst case scenario for a lot of these people. But it seems like all across the board, Chicago lawmakers and some downstate Democrats really want to make sure this bill passes, but also that downstate transit agencies benefit from this bill.
All right, well, thank you very much, Cameron.
All right, sweet. Thank you, Austin. Appreciate it. We'll leave you down in the bureau for now, but I got Molly back with me now to talk about this story that we have.
The slug for it already caught my attention.
Oh, did it? This is an interesting tip for work. Several business books, team building manuals, and LinkedIn posts suggest sharing humor with colleagues at work. But a new study finds people should probably stay away from trying to be funny. A University of Arizona study says the downside of cracking a bad joke is harder than what you might gain by landing a good one. Managers who used humor effectively were seen as more confident and competent, but when the joke didn't land, the same managers lost status and credibility. The study also found bosses who joke too often can push employees into pretending to be amused, which can drain energy.
It's not my fault that I'm hilarious when I'm at work.
Look, I think we've got the weekend team here. We've got great
We're
humor.
so funny.
We're so funny.
We're so funny.
Yeah.
I haven't been on the weekends in a hot minute, it feels like, because I've been filling in for Chris, but...
And Chris is in Narnia, basically.
Yes, Chris is overseas on the station trip. He'll be back next week, but...
Woo! Does that mean you'll come on weekends?
I'll be back on Sunday.
Woohoo! Let's go. Best news ever.
Oh, wait, we're not supposed to be funny at work. We can't do that. Yep.
That is great news, Molly.
Yes, thank you, Cameron.
All right, we've got one more local story for you when we return on Beyond the Headlines. We're sitting down with meteorologist Molly Naisland. That's you.
That is me.
Welcome back. Another big local story of the day. Burn bans across central Illinois. Meteorologist Molly Naisland joins us now to explain everything that we need to know about these burn bans and the dry weather that's been really facing us across the board. Thank you for coming on, even though you've been here the whole time.
Hanging out.
She's been hanging. So what is a burn ban?
Well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. People are banned from open burning. And a lot of times, at least from my experience growing up, a lot of this came down to maybe ditch clearing burning, brush burning, maybe just some bonfires, burning leaves that fall, because I mean, we used to do that a lot when I was growing up in the country. But there are a lot of burn bans. The city of Washington, the Central and Pleasant View Fire Protection District, due to no upcoming rain in Washington, no outdoor burning is allowed while this ban is in effect. So there are a lot of concerns with the drought conditions, and this is something that we've been talking about for a while, is the drought conditions, the fact that there's no rain in sight. Something that people might hear is drought begets drought. It stays dry, there's no moisture in the air, so it continues to be dry, and any moisture that does come in evaporates, and there's usually not enough. It takes a really big kick from Mother Nature for us to start seeing rain, and we just don't have any of that in the forecast. So yeah, it's natural that there are burn bans in effect, because when there's no rain in the forecast, not only is the brush at the surface dry, but it's dry the further down you go into the dirt.
Right, okay, so it's just Huge fire hazard across the board.
Pretty much, and this is something that we can also see with farming equipment because, I mean, no matter how well you take care of your farming equipment, sparks can happen. Metal brushing against metal can create sparks. So this is where we see this portion of the year, it's not unusual for it to get dry. In fact, fall brings its own fire weather season for the Midwest, like a mini one, not anything that we've seen.
Not like Australian
Not like
bushfires.
Australia with bushfires, not like Los Angeles with
Right.
the wildfires, nothing like that. But farming equipment can spark, it can light the very, very dry brush, and especially when we get through harvest season, we have bits of corn stalks that are still left in the fields. Those are extremely dry and very easily flammable. I know when I was growing up, something that we did frequently to keep culverts clear under driveways and stuff is we would burn some of the leaves that were in the ditch. Well, you can't do that when it's this dry outside. And on top of that, when it gets windy, if you are burning something, that wind can take the embers, land them somewhere else, and start a fire somewhere else, which is extremely dangerous.
And so basically, I think maybe from my experience in Australia, like if a small fire starts, it can get huge really, really quickly. Is that kind of similar for the Midwest at this time?
Yeah, that's very, very possible. I mean, you've seen that we just have these massive expanse of flat fields across the area. So it's very easy for a spark in one spot to just ignite a lot of space, especially when the grass and the brush has been so dry lately. That's
Right.
just more fuel for that to go through.
Right, okay. Well, thank you, Molly, for breaking that down. And we've got another story for you to check out because there's big news in the world of The Simpsons. Another Simpsons movie is coming Monday. Disney's 20th Century Studio announced a sequel to The Simpsons movie. It's officially releasing in theaters on July 23rd, 2027. That's a long time away. That will be 20 years, actually, after the first movie came out. The Simpsons is the longest-running sitcom in television history. It has been renewed for its 40th season through 2029.
I have watched The Simpsons, not like consistently by any means, but I do think it's cool that they're doing a second Simpsons movie.
Yes.
That's definitely fun. I wonder what the second movie is going to be about.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting because I remember watching that movie as a kid because I was a huge Simpsons fan as a kid. You know, we had Foxtel in Australia, which I think is like the Americans' equivalent of old school Netflix, where you had like the device and it would get all the channels. We had that, and so The Simpsons were on Fox all throughout the morning and the weekend. So we would always tune into The Simpsons. So I watched a lot of it as a kid, and I loved the movie as a kid. Which maybe we're making people sound old when I say watch the movie as a kid.
20 years old, I literally went, ooh.
Yeah, 20 years ago is pretty crazy.
Because I do remember when that movie came out.
Yeah, I remember watching it in theaters, and I watched that movie a lot over time.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's
We're not even that old, and we're like, whew.
whew, time goes by.
It does.
Well, thanks for joining us, and for today's Beyond the Headlines, you can find all these stories and more over on our website, ciproud.com. See you later.
For breaking news and weather updates 24/7, log on to ciproud.com and download the free CI Proud to Go mobile app.